A millionaire nearly lost everything when his fiancée tried to humiliate and isolate his own mother. The truth only came out thanks to the courage of the housemaid. Hello friends, where are you watching from today? Let me know in the comments and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. The Mason estate had always carried an air of permanence, as if time itself bent to its will. The sprawling mansion, erected in the late 1800s, sat high on a knoll above the sleepy town of Ashford. Its columns framed a wide veranda, and ivy crept faithfully along the stone walls, covering cracks left by decades of wind and rain. The grounds, carefully maintained, rolled into gardens filled with hydrangeas, roses, and an ancient oak tree that stood like a sentinel at the edge of the lawn. To Mary Mason, every brick of the house was stitched into her own memory. She had been born here, had raised her son here, and at 75, she found solace in the stillness of its halls. Robert Mason, her only child, had inherited not only the house but the family's business empire. At 42, he carried the weight of Mason Industries with the dignity of his late father, but bore lines across his forehead that revealed the cost of such responsibility. He balanced boardroom negotiations with quiet dinners at home with Mary, whose presence was his anchor. She, in turn, watched him with pride and a tinge of worry. He was successful, yes, but lonely. That had changed months ago when he had introduced her to the idea of Carla Reed. Carla arrived that afternoon in a silver sedan, stepping from the car with the poise of a woman accustomed to admiration. Tall, elegantly dressed in a tailored cream coat, she removed her sunglasses with deliberate grace. Her auburn hair glinted under the late autumn sun, and her lips curved in a smile that never reached her eyes. Robert greeted her with warmth, leaning in to kiss her cheek. "Carla, this is where I grew up." And this, he turned toward the porch, where Mary stood waiting in her lavender cardigan. "This is my mother." Mary extended her hand with polite kindness. Carla took it, but her grip was fleeting, almost dismissive. Her eyes darted across the porch as if evaluating the woodwork for signs of rot. "What a lovely home," Carla said, her voice smooth. "It must be a challenge to keep it all up at your age." The words landed softly, coated in sugar, but Mary felt the prick beneath. She released Carla's hand and forced a smile. "It has stood the test of time." "As have I." Robert, oblivious, chuckled. "Mother insists on keeping the gardens just as father liked them." Carla's gaze swept across the yard. "Yes, well, roses can be stubborn, can't they? Much like memories. They linger, whether or not they're useful." Rose Harper, standing discreetly near the door, stiffened. As housekeeper, companion, and loyal friend, she had been with the family for 15 years. At 48, she knew how to fade into the background, but her eyes missed nothing. She studied Carla's polished exterior, noting the flicker of disinterest that betrayed her words. The group moved inside, and the atmosphere shifted. The mansion's interior, filled with polished wood, oil paintings, and the faint scent of lavender polish, contrasted sharply with Carla's sterile elegance. Over tea, Mary asked about Carla's family, but the answers were evasive, fragments about travel, about parents no longer in the picture. The details were polished away like stones in a river, leaving nothing to grasp. Carla's attention turned back to Mary. "Robert tells me you've lived here all your life. That's remarkable. Still, I imagine it can feel overwhelming now. These old places, they require so much attention. And your memory, keeping track of everything, it must be exhausting." Mary froze, teacup halfway to her lips. Robert frowned, not catching the full weight of the remark. Rose, however, saw the slight tremor in Mary's hand. The afternoon waned. As Carla excused herself to take a call on the veranda, Mary leaned closer to her son. "She is different, Robert. Cold somehow." He patted her hand. "She's nervous. It's the first time she's been here. Give her a chance." Mary nodded, but unease settled in her chest. Something in Carla's eyes, in the way she lingered on imperfections, whispered danger. When Carla returned, her smile was sharp as glass. "Shall we discuss plans for the future?" she asked. The normal rhythm of the household cracked that day, a fracture no one could yet name, but one that would widen with every passing hour. The following days carried with them the scent of fallen leaves and the weight of unspoken thoughts. Mary walked through the gardens each morning, her cane tapping softly against the stone paths. She paused often at the oak tree, its branches now bare against the sky, remembering when Robert had climbed it as a boy. Memories clung to the estate like ivy, comforting, yes, but also reminders of all she had lost. Robert joined her occasionally before leaving for work. His schedule was demanding, and his phone buzzed relentlessly, but here, under the oak shade, he sometimes allowed himself a moment of stillness. "You always seem far away these days," Mary said softly one morning. He smiled faintly. "I suppose I am. Between the company and, well, Carla." Her heart tightened. "She is important to you." "Yes," Robert said. "She makes me feel seen in a way I haven't felt in years. But I want her to feel welcome here, Mother. I need you to try." Mary touched his sleeve. "I will. For you." But the unease deepened. Carla's presence had left more than discomfort. It had stirred memories Mary wished had stayed buried. She recalled whispers at church decades ago when a friend's son had married a woman who, over time, isolated him from his family. The marriage ended in ruin. The story had returned to her mind the moment Carla's smile flickered false. That evening, Rose entered the library where Mary sat with a book unread in her lap. "She unsettles you," Rose said gently. Mary looked up, startled by the directness. "Is it so obvious?" Rose sat across from her, folding her hands. "I've seen women like her before. Pretty words, sharp edges. She watches you too closely, as if she's waiting for you to stumble." Mary exhaled. "And perhaps I will. I forget things sometimes. I misplace my glasses, lose track of time. What if she is right, Rose?" "She is not," Rose said firmly. "You are 75, not lost. Don't let her make you doubt yourself." The words steadied Mary, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Later that night, as she prepared for bed, she stood at her vanity and studied her reflection. The lines etched into her face seemed deeper, the silver in her hair brighter. She whispered to the mirror, "Am I fading?" In another part of the house, Robert and Carla sat in the parlor. Carla crossed her legs elegantly, leaning closer. "She seemed confused earlier when I asked about dinner. Do you think she might need help with the household soon?" Robert frowned. "She has Rose." "Yes, but Rose isn't family," Carla said smoothly. "Your mother is fragile. If you truly love her, shouldn't you consider what's best? A residence where she has constant care, where you won't have to worry." The idea slipped into his mind like smoke. He shook his head, but said nothing. Carla's smile widened. "Think about it. You'll see I'm right." Upstairs, Mary lay awake, hearing faint echoes of voices below, but unable to catch the words. A chill passed through her. She closed her eyes, praying that Robert would see what she could not yet prove. The mansion, once a fortress of certainty, now harbored shadows that stretched into every corner. And in those shadows, something insidious was growing. The day Robert left for a string of meetings in the city began like any other, with sunlight spilling across the long dining table and Mary insisting on pouring her son's coffee despite his protests. She loved small rituals, those daily assurances that family life endured even in the shadow of business empires. "You'll be back late?" she asked, stirring cream into her own cup. "Likely after 9. Carla may come by this afternoon, if that's all right," Robert said, tightening his tie. Mary nodded, though her stomach sank. She forced a smile. "Of course. I'll see her." Rose watched silently as Robert kissed his mother's forehead and left. The sound of the front door closing echoed more heavily than usual, as though sealing Mary inside with something she could not name. By mid-afternoon, Carla's silver sedan glided up the drive. She entered with a bright laugh that carried no warmth. "Mary, how are you today? You look tired." Mary, standing in the foyer, adjusted her cardigan. "I am well, thank you." "Are you sure?" Carla tilted her head, studying her like an artifact. "Sometimes you seem a little confused. Robert worries, you know. He told me about the time you left the back door unlocked overnight." Mary's heart lurched. "That never happened." Carla's smile didn't waver. "Perhaps you forgot. It's not unusual." She placed a manicured hand on Mary's arm. "You've lived a long, full life. There's no shame in letting others take care of you." Mary pulled away gently. "I am not helpless." Carla walked into the sitting room without waiting to be invited, her eyes roving across the shelves of books and framed photographs. She picked up a picture of Robert as a boy in Little League uniform. "He has carried so much responsibility. Don't you want to make his life easier? Mary bristled. Robert has never thought of me as a burden. Not yet, Carla murmured. But imagine if something happened. A forgotten stove burner, a misplaced pill. He would never forgive himself. That's why I've been researching options. Wonderful residences with trained staff, places where you'd be safe. The Hope residence, for instance. It's like a resort. Mary's cane pressed harder against the rug as she steadied herself. This is my home. Carla replaced the photo and turned, her voice honeyed but her eyes sharp. Home is where you're cared for. You cannot expect Robert to carry both his business and you. It's too much. He deserves a future unshackled. Mary's breath caught at the word. Shackled. She sank into an armchair, trembling. Carla leaned over her, whispering as though imparting a secret. You don't want to be a fardel, do you? The mispronunciation of fardel instead of burden was deliberate, mocking. Mary closed her eyes. She felt small, diminished. Unseen, Rose stood in the doorway, her fists clenched. She had heard every word. When Carla finally left, perfume trailing in the air, Rose hurried to Mary's side. She is cruel, Rose said. Mary shook her head weakly. Perhaps she is right. Perhaps I am slipping. You are not, Rose whispered fiercely. Don't let her convince you of lies. I will not allow it. That night, when Robert returned, Carla had already planted her seed. Over dinner she sighed, recounting fabricated concerns. Your mother seemed so tired today. She almost left the kettle on. Robert frowned. He looked at Mary, who lowered her gaze to her plate. Doubt crept in, silent but corrosive. The first confrontation had begun, and though no voices were raised, the battlefield was clear. Days passed, each one pulling tighter at the threads of Mary's composure. Carla arrived often, never empty-handed. Sometimes she brought glossy brochures filled with images of smiling seniors lounging by pools. Other times, she carried stories of friends' parents who had thrived in communities like Hope Residence. Rose observed the strategy, relentless repetition, small insinuations dressed as care. She's weaving a net, Rose confided to Mary one evening in the kitchen. And she wants you caught. Mary's eyes were weary. But Robert listens to her. I see it. He wants to believe she has our best interests at heart. Rose gripped her hand. Then we must show him the truth. The truth, however, was slippery. Carla excelled at shaping perception. She would point out a misplaced pair of glasses, then sigh as if confirming a pattern. She'd note that Mary repeated a story at dinner, exaggerating the pause before Robert laughed politely. Each incident alone was trivial. Together they became a case. One afternoon, while Robert was away, Carla strolled into the garden where Mary sat knitting. It's dangerous to sit out in the sun too long, she remarked, shielding her eyes with a hand. At your age, it could be harmful. Did you remember your medication today? Mary stiffened. I take it every morning. Carla smiled sweetly. That's good. Because Robert mentioned you once forgot. We wouldn't want that happening again. Mary's needles stilled. He never said that. Perhaps you don't remember. The phrase landed like a stone. Mary's knitting slipped to the ground. Rose, pruning roses nearby, straightened and walked over. Mrs. Mason doesn't need reminders like that, she said evenly. Carla's lips curved into a polite sneer. I was only expressing concern. Isn't that what family does? You are not family, Rose said, her voice low. Not yet. For the first time, Carla's mask faltered. Her eyes flashed with something colder before she turned on her heel and returned to the house. Later that evening, Robert arrived home and found Carla already waiting with a glass of wine in hand. Your mother was confused again today, she said with feigned sorrow. She dropped her knitting, forgot her medication. I worry about her safety. You should too. Robert's shoulders tensed. I'll talk to her. But when he entered the sitting room, Mary sat upright, her knitting neatly beside her, eyes steady. I am not confused, she said before he could speak. Do not let her tell you otherwise. The firmness in her tone startled him. He saw not frailty, but resolve. Yet Carla's earlier words lingered, shadowing his judgment. The unexpected turn came not from Mary or Carla, but from Robert himself. Torn between two loyalties, he agreed to visit Hope Residence. Just to see, Carla urged, slipping her hand into his. It will give you peace of mind. Rose overheard. Her heart tightened, but her mind sharpened. If Robert would not see through Carla's charade, she would need evidence. Undeniable, irrefutable. That night she retrieved a small recorder from her drawer. It fit neatly into her palm, a tool of last resort. She whispered to herself, if she wants to play games, we'll see who wins. The board had shifted. Carla thought she was closing her net, but Rose had just chosen her first weapon. The following weeks stretched long and tense, every conversation threaded with invisible barbs. Carla maintained her charming facade in Robert's presence, offering him subtle reassurances of her devotion while weaving careful doubts about Mary's well-being. Yet beneath the polished exterior, her campaign grew sharper. Robert, exhausted from negotiations downtown, often returned late to find Carla already waiting in the parlor. Her voice was soft, persuasive. I only want what's best for her, Robert. For both of you. Don't you see? A place like Hope Residence would give you peace. She would be cared for, and you would finally be free to breathe. Robert ran a hand through his hair. She won't agree. She doesn't need to agree, Carla said gently, as though soothing a child. Sometimes we must make hard decisions for those we love. The words lingered long after she left, echoing through his mind as he climbed the stairs to his mother's room. There, Mary sat reading, her glasses perched on the end of her nose. She looked up, smiling faintly. You work too hard. He kissed her cheek, but guilt pricked at him. Was she as strong as she seemed? Or had Carla planted a truth he didn't want to face? Meanwhile, Rose watched the subtle erosion of trust with growing fury. She saw how Robert leaned into Carla's counsel, how he began to second-guess his mother. Rose knew the house's rhythms. She knew when Mary misplaced her glasses and when she didn't, when the kettle whistled safely switched off and when it hadn't been touched. Carla's accusations were lies, plain and deliberate. One evening, Rose found Mary in the conservatory, her knitting idle in her lap. He doesn't believe me anymore, Mary whispered. Every time she speaks, I see his eyes change. Rose knelt beside her chair. Then we will show him. But you must hold on. Do not let her convince you that you are less than you are. Mary reached for her hand, her grip surprisingly firm. You are my strength, Rose. Promise me you won't let her take him from me. I promise, Rose said. The alliance was sealed in that moment, silent, unbreakable. But elsewhere, divisions deepened. Robert's partner at the firm, Henry, had noticed Carla's increasing presence. Over lunch one afternoon, he leaned across the table. She's at the house often, isn't she? Robert shrugged. She and my mother need to know each other. Henry raised an eyebrow. Be careful. I've seen women who entangle not just the man, but the family. And when business is involved, complications multiply. Robert waved the warning away, but unease stirred. Even at work, whispers of Carla's influence followed him. Back at the mansion, Carla had begun to insert herself into the smallest details. She reorganized pantry shelves, replaced Mary's preferred china with newer, flashier pieces, and commented on the outdated furniture. Robert deserves a home that reflects his success, she said airily. Mary bristled. This house reflects history. His father's memory. My life. Carla only smiled. Nostalgia is a heavy chain, Mary. Don't you want Robert to move forward? Rose overheard, fury simmering. She began carrying the small recorder in her apron pocket, waiting for the moment when Carla's mask would slip again. The house became a battlefield divided into factions. Robert, wavering between loyalty and seduction. Mary, clinging to dignity. Rose, preparing her defense. Carla, tightening her hold. The alliances had been drawn, the divisions deepened. The storm was coming, though none could yet see how fierce it would become. The visit to Hope Residence marked the midpoint of Robert's wavering. Carla insisted on arranging it, presenting it as a casual tour. No pressure, she said sweetly. Just an afternoon to see what possibilities exist. Robert agreed, though doubt gnawed at him. Mary refused to join them, her chin lifted in quiet defiance. Rose stayed behind with her, both women standing side by side as they watched the car pull away. The residence was polished and bright, with manicured gardens and cheerful staff who greeted Robert with rehearsed warmth. Residents in pastel cardigans played cards in the lounge, while others dozed in sunlit corners. Carla's voice rang with triumph. See how happy they are? No worries, no burdens. Imagine your mother here, safe, cared for. But Robert's gaze lingered on the subtle shadows. The residents smiled, yes, but their eyes were distant. One woman clutched a worn photograph, staring at it, as if clinging to the last thread of memory. Another man shuffled aimlessly down the hall, his expression blank. The facility was spotless, but the air carried a quiet sorrow. On the drive back, Robert said little. Carla prattled on about amenities, about the relief it would bring him. Yet unease grew heavier in his chest. That evening, as he sat in his study, Rose appeared at the door. "May I speak?" He looked up, surprised by her formality. "Of course." She stepped inside, holding a small recorder. "I need you to hear something. It is not my place to interfere, but I cannot stay silent." He frowned. "What is it?" Rose pressed play. Carla's voice filled the room, sharp and mocking. "You don't want to be a burden, do you? Robert deserves a future unshackled. You can't keep him tied here forever. One mistake, one forgotten pill, and you'll prove me right." Mary's voice followed, trembling. "This is my home." Carla's response was laced with cruelty. "Home is where you're put when you can't be trusted anymore." The recording ended. Silence hung heavy. Robert's face drained of color. He leaned back, pressing a hand to his mouth. "She said this." "Yes," Rose said firmly. "I have watched her twist words, invent mistakes. She is not what she pretends to be. You must protect your mother, Robert." He closed his eyes, anger surging like fire. Images of Carla's polished smile, her gentle touch, her soothing reassurances, all shattered against the truth of the recording. He had been blind, willingly so. When he confronted Carla later that night, the mask finally cracked. She laughed, a sharp sound. "So the servant spies on me now? How quaint." "Enough," Robert said, his voice cold. "You have insulted my mother, undermined her, and lied to me. Get out." Her smile vanished. For a moment, something raw flickered in her eyes. Rage, perhaps fear. Then she straightened her shoulders. "You will regret this. You think you're rid of me, but I don't let go so easily." Rose stood behind Robert, steady as a pillar. Mary watched from the stairs, relief softening her features. For the first time in weeks, she felt safe. But Carla's parting words echoed long after the door slammed. They were not empty threats. They were promises. The first secret had been revealed, and with it, the battle had only just begun. The morning after Carla's expulsion dawned strangely quiet, as though the mansion itself held its breath. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, glinting off the polished wood floors, but no one trusted the calm. Robert paced his study, guilt heavy on his shoulders. His confrontation with Carla had been necessary, yet he couldn't silence the echo of her parting threat. Mary entered softly, leaning on her cane. Her face bore exhaustion, but her eyes carried determination. "You did what was right," she told him. He sank into a chair, running his hand over his face. "I let her into our lives. I almost believed her lies about you. His voice broke. Mary rested her hand on his arm. "Almost is not forever. You saw the truth before it was too late." Rose, standing at the doorway, added, "But she isn't finished. Women like her don't vanish quietly." Robert nodded grimly. "Then we'll be ready." Despite his vow, he carried unease into the following days. At work, he found whispers waiting, rumors of questionable decisions, whispers that his mother's health had declined, even suggestions that he was hiding her instability to protect the company's image. Henry, his longtime partner, confronted him directly. "These stories didn't appear from nowhere," Henry said during a tense meeting. "Carla's hand is in this, I'm sure. She's damaging your reputation." Robert clenched his jaw. "I'll handle it." But handling it meant war. The first strike had been cast. There could be no return to normal. At the mansion, Rose noticed Mary becoming quieter, more contemplative. "Do not let her win," Rose urged one evening as they shared tea. Mary sighed. "I've lived long enough to know that shadows always find their way back, even after you drive them out. But I trust you, Rose. And I trust my son." The trust was tested sooner than either expected. A package arrived at the house. Inside, glossy photographs of luxury residences, each marked with notes in Carla's handwriting. Across one page, in bold ink, was scrawled, "This is where you belong." Mary's hand shook as she held the papers. "She is still here," she whispered. Rose snatched the package and tossed it into the fire. "Not here. Not with us." But even as the flames consumed the pages, Robert knew the truth. Carla was circling, waiting for her chance to strike again. The line had been crossed. There was no undoing what had been set in motion. The family's fragile unity stood, but the storm was closing in, and the Mason mansion was no longer sanctuary. It was battleground. Carla's counterattack arrived swiftly. The whispers she planted at the company grew louder, spreading beyond boardrooms into the press. An article appeared online, questioning Robert Mason's judgment and hinting at unresolved family issues that might compromise his leadership. At breakfast, Robert slammed the paper down. "She's trying to destroy everything." Mary looked stricken. "Robert, I'm sorry." "No, Mother," he interrupted, gripping her hand. "This is not your fault. This is her venom." Rose leaned across the table. "Then we need to be ready when she comes here again. And she will. She can't stand that you pushed her out." That night, the mansion's silence felt different, heavy, charged. Mary sat awake in her bedroom, unable to shake the memory of Carla's mocking voice. She wandered the halls, her cane tapping softly against the wooden floors, until she reached her late husband's study. The smell of leather and old books clung to the air. She whispered into the stillness, "James, guide our son. Protect him from my mistakes." Meanwhile, Robert worked late, determined to shield the company from further scandal. He didn't notice the small ways Carla's influence had begun seeping back in. Suspicious calls to board members, quiet threats whispered in social circles. She was dismantling his life piece by piece. The real blow came 2 nights later. Rose discovered the stove burner lit, a pot blackened on its base. Mary stood nearby, confused and pale. "I thought I turned it off," she said weakly. Rose hurried to steady her. "She's been here," Rose whispered. "Carla, she wants to make it look like you're losing your mind." Robert, arriving moments later, found his mother in tears. He stared at the scorched pot, his chest tightening. For one heart-stopping second, he wondered, had Carla been right? But then he saw Rose's steady eyes, saw Mary's trembling shoulders. "No," he said aloud. "This isn't her mistake. This is sabotage." Mary buried her face in his chest. "I don't know what's real anymore." The consequence was not just damage to reputation, but damage to Mary herself. The relentless gaslighting had wormed its way into her heart. She doubted her own senses, her own worth. That, Robert realized with a surge of rage, had been Carla's goal all along. The next morning, Rose confronted him. "We can't wait for her to strike again. You must act, Robert. If you don't, she will break your mother completely." Robert's answer was iron. "Then I will not wait. If Carla wants war, she will have it." The unexpected consequence of expelling her had been escalation, not resolution. But it also hardened Robert's resolve. He would not be passive again. Carla had underestimated something: the strength of a son's love for his mother and the fierce loyalty of the woman who had vowed to protect them both. The storm broke on a Friday night, when the weight of weeks of tension pressed down on the Mason estate like an invisible hand. Robert returned late from the office, his tie loosened, his eyes shadowed with fatigue. He found Rose waiting in the foyer, her expression grim. "She's been here," Rose said quietly. Robert froze. "Carla," Rose nodded. "While you were away." Mary swears she saw her at the edge of the garden. A figure in a dark coat. "When I checked, the gate was ajar. She's taunting us." He clenched his fists. "This ends tonight." But before he could decide how, the doorbell rang. On the steps stood Dr. Mark Lawson, the family's longtime attorney. His face was grave as he stepped inside, clutching a leather folder. "I've come because you need to know something," he said. "Something about Carla Reed." They gathered in the sitting room: Robert, Mary, Rose. The crackle of the fireplace was the only sound as Lawson opened the folder and laid out documents: driver's licenses, court records, news clippings. "Carla Reed is an invention," he said. "Her real name is Carmen Summers. 42 years old. A grifter. She has a history of infiltrating families, isolating the sons from their mothers, and draining their assets." Mary's breath hitched. Rose leaned forward, scanning the documents. One headline screamed, "Business heir Frederick Monroe bankrupted after mysterious marriage." Another, "Death of Anthony Fisher's mother raises questions." Lawson's voice was steady. Carmen targeted men who were vulnerable to her charm. Always men with strong family ties to their mothers. She sowed division, convinced them their mothers were unstable, then positioned herself to inherit wealth or take control. Some of those mothers are gone now, under suspicious circumstances. Robert's stomach turned cold. He gripped the arms of his chair. "She wanted to do the same to us." "Yes," Lawson said. "And when you pushed her out, she shifted tactics. She'll try to destroy your reputation, maybe even frighten your mother into submission." She doesn't stop until she gets what she wants, or until she's exposed. Mary whispered. All this time, I thought it was only me. But she's done this before. Robert took her hand. You are not alone, Mother. Not anymore. Rose's eyes hardened. Then we must expose her. The truth is our weapon now. Lawson closed the folder. Be cautious. Carmen is clever. If she feels cornered, she may lash out. The room fell silent. They knew, each of them, that the revelation had changed everything. Carla Reed no longer existed in their minds. Only Carmen Summers remained, a predator with a history of shattered families behind her. Buried truths had surfaced, and with them came clarity. The battle ahead was not just personal, it was a fight for survival. The following days were a blur of strategy and vigilance. Robert, shaken but resolute, began reinforcing both his business and his home. At the office, he called emergency meetings with Henry and the board, addressing the rumors directly. Carla Reed, Carmen Summers, has been spreading lies, he told them. We have evidence of her history. I will not allow Mason Industries to be poisoned by her manipulation. Some doubted, some whispered, but Henry stood beside him. I've reviewed Lawson's files, he announced firmly. Robert speaks the truth. We must close ranks. Back at the mansion, Rose took on a new role, protector not only of the household but of Mary herself. She checked locks twice each night, ensured windows were latched, and kept the recorder near at hand. Mary, though still shaken, began to find strength again. She spent hours in the library, writing in her journal. One evening she told Rose, if she comes again, I will not cower. I want Robert to see that I can stand. Rose smiled gently. And I'll be standing beside you. The preparations extended beyond defense. Robert sought out allies in the community, friends, colleagues, neighbors, quietly spreading the truth about Carmen. He wanted the world to know before she could unleash her next move. Yet Carmen was not idle. Rumors multiplied. Anonymous emails reached journalists. At one board meeting, a reporter shouted questions about Mary Mason's declining health. Robert felt the trap closing. That night, as rain lashed against the windows, Robert sat with Mary and Rose in the parlor. She will come here, he said flatly. When her lies no longer suffice, she will try to finish what she started. Mary shivered but held his gaze. Then let her come. This house has stood for generations. It will stand against her. Rose reached for Robert's hand. You've carried your father's legacy, Robert. Now carry your mother's. Show her that this family cannot be broken. The fire crackled, shadows dancing across their faces. Outside, the storm howled. Inside, a quiet determination bound them together. Every lock had been checked. Every ally had been warned. Every secret was now revealed. The stage was set. The Mason family and Carmen Summers were moving inexorably toward their final confrontation. The storm came not with thunder, but with silence. On a night when Robert had been summoned to an emergency meeting at Mason Industries, an uproar sparked by rumors seeded by Carmen, the mansion stood vulnerable. Mary sat in the parlor, her knitting needles moving slowly, the steady clack a shield against her nerves. Rose busied herself in the kitchen, but kept watch through the window that overlooked the garden. The first sound was the crunch of tires on gravel. Headlights cut through the darkness. Rose stiffened. She moved quickly, extinguishing the kitchen lamp, plunging the room into shadow. Through the curtain, she saw the unmistakable figure of Carmen Summers step from a black car. Dressed in a sleek coat, Carmen's face was half-shadowed, her smile sharp. She moved toward the mansion with the deliberate stride of someone who believed the ground belonged to her. Mary's heart raced as the front door creaked open. Carmen didn't knock. She slipped inside like a specter returning to claim what had been denied. Well, she said softly, her voice carrying through the parlor. Did you miss me? Mary rose shakily to her feet, cane trembling in her grip. You are not welcome here. Carmen's laugh was low, chilling. You poor woman. Still clinging to pride when everyone can see you're fading. Robert is mine, Mary. He knows it, even if he pretends otherwise. And when you're tucked away in a residence, he'll thank me. Rose stepped from the shadows, placing herself between Carmen and Mary. Not while I'm here. Carmen's eyes narrowed. The servant turned bodyguard. How quaint. Mary, gathering courage, lifted her chin. Rose is more family than you will ever be. For the first time, Carmen's mask slipped. Rage flickered across her face. You think you've won because you chased me out? I can destroy you with one whisper. Robert's company teeters already. I can topple it. And when the world sees him as weak, he'll have no choice but to turn to me. You underestimate him, Rose said firmly. And you underestimate us. Carmen stepped closer, menace in every movement. Mary gripped her cane, but before she could falter, Rose planted herself squarely in front, unyielding. In that instant, Robert burst through the doorway. His meeting had ended abruptly when Henry warned him of a possible intrusion. He froze at the sight, Carmen looming, Mary trembling, Rose standing like a shield. Enough! Robert's voice cracked like thunder. He strode forward, fury in every line of his face. Carmen Summers, you will never set foot in this house again. Carmen turned, her smile twisting. So you finally learned my name. I know everything, he said coldly. Frederick Monroe. Anthony Fisher. The trail of destruction you left behind. You won't add Mason to that list. Her composure wavered. You think you can stop me? Yes, he said. Because this time, you face more than a man blinded by charm. You face his mother, and the woman who protects her, and the truth. Silence filled the room, thick as smoke. Carmen's gaze darted between them, searching for weakness, but found none. Robert opened the door. Leave, or I'll ensure the authorities see every record Lawson has gathered. For a heartbeat, Carmen hesitated. Then, with a hiss of contempt, she swept past him into the night. The slam of the door echoed like the final stroke of a gavel. Mary sank into a chair, trembling, but her eyes shone. She's gone. Rose placed a steady hand on her shoulder. For good. Robert knelt before his mother, voice breaking. Forgive me for ever doubting you. Mary stroked his hair gently. You saw the truth in time. That is what matters. The moment of truth had arrived, and the family had stood together. But the battle scars would take time to heal. In the weeks that followed, calm returned to the Mason estate. Yet calm was not the same as silence. The house, once haunted by whispers of manipulation, now hummed with renewal. Carmen Summers disappeared from their lives, her threats blunted by the evidence Lawson delivered to the authorities. Whispers of her past deeds spread, not about Robert or Mary, but about the predator who had preyed on families. The Monroe and Fisher families reached out with words of solidarity, united by scars only they could truly understand. Robert, chastened and resolute, sought to turn pain into purpose. We cannot be the last family she tries to destroy, he told his mother and Rose one evening. Others need protection, guidance, hope. We can give that. And so, within 2 months, plans were finalized. The old community center downtown, long abandoned, was purchased and renovated under Robert's name. At the opening ceremony, banners read, Mary Mason Senior Community Center. Mary, dressed in pale blue, stood before a small crowd. Her voice wavered but carried strength. This center is not just for the elderly. It is for families. To remind them that love is not a burden. That care is not confinement. And that true family, whether by blood or by choice, protects, forgives, and endures. Applause thundered. Tears blurred Robert's vision as he stood beside her, his arm around Rose. Rose herself had been elevated to a new place in their lives. No longer only the housekeeper, she became the administrator of the center, Robert's trusted partner in both compassion and practicality. For Mary, she was confidant and guardian. For Robert, she was the quiet compass that had guided him back to truth. Together, they built programs to help families recognize signs of manipulation, workshops on protecting elders, and spaces where stories could be shared without shame. Survivors found one another, and slowly, healing began. On the day the first group of seniors arrived, Robert stood by the window of the center, watching laughter ripple through the hall. He turned to Mary and Rose, his voice thick with emotion. We turned her cruelty into something that will save others. That is our victory. Mary smiled softly. Redemption, Robert. That is what this is. That evening, as twilight settled over Ashford, the three of them returned to the mansion. They sat on the porch together, Robert, Mary, and Rose. The oak tree swayed gently in the breeze, a sentinel watching over them. Robert looked at the two women beside him and felt a peace he had never known. The world had tried to fracture them, but instead it had fused them into something stronger. No more manipulation. No more shadows. Only love, care, and purpose. The story of betrayal had ended in a story of renewal. And in that final image, mother, son, and protector united, the Mason family found its new horizon. If you made it this far, leave us a comment telling us where you're watching from today and what you thought of the story. If you can, share this video with your friends and family, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to receive new videos. A big hug, and see you tomorrow.